Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of Ask Larry. What I have asked them to do for today is the questions I'm getting over and over and over again sent to me. Most of them are covered by this useful information about real estate transactions. I use this with all my buyers, and I offer it to the sellers also. But as part of my purchaser's package that they receive up front about doing real estate. Useful information about real estate, contract form, agency, buyer broker form, and something about me and the company goes out in a package. And this form covers quite a few of the questions that they should be referring to or asking in the transaction. So I just want to take this form today. It's not something that's attached to a contract. You see there is a place for signatures. That is only for acknowledgement that they've seen it, okay? But I think this form should be in the hands of every buyer before you even start out. So let's just take a look at it paragraph by paragraph. If you have questions about it, shout out, okay? The first paragraph is pretty boilerplate. Just remember your realtors are providing you with this information in order to assist you in making informed decisions when purchasing, selling, or optioning real estate. And that's one of our duties, is to make sure people make informed decisions, not just buy a house, okay? Under services, regardless of who we represent, okay, there's all types of information and assistance that we can give to anybody in a transaction. For example, can assist, and the key word here is customers. You can work with a customer. You can assist a customer by performing ministerial acts. What is a ministerial act? Well, that's not something I do on Sunday at an open house. A ministerial act is things that will help the transaction going forward without creating an agency relationship if they're a customer. So customer in Virginia, remember the definition means you have not entered into a contractual relationship to represent someone. Then our law presumes they are a customer, and you can perform ministerial acts. You can
I'm sorry,
make sure
what form are you talking about?
I'm talking about the useful information about real estate transaction form K-1297 that they attached to the session email today.
Okay, thank you.
Does everyone have it? Okay, so a ministerial act, you need a loan, okay? So you can give them a list of lenders, or they have the right to choose one of their own. They need a title company. You can give them a list and they can choose, okay? You can recommend, but you can't choose. For a client, you can do things for them. You can actually say, you know, I'll do this, you know, I'll contact RTS for you, etc. Okay? So there's a difference between working for a client and working with a customer. We can supply information about available properties, sources of financing, describing and showing properties. I prefer that our agents never leave the office without a written buyer broker agreement to show homes, because we do not have sub-agency in the state of Virginia today. We have not since 1995, and I still see it offered even though we don't have it. We will discuss that in a session of agency, okay? Assisting in preparing. With a customer, you cannot tell them what to offer, okay? You shouldn't even really be doing them a market analysis because you're not representing them, okay? They need to tell you what price to put in the contract, okay? They need to tell you the terms. So we can prepare, we can assist in preparing and we can submit purchase offers or counter offers, and we could provide information about settlement procedures, what to expect. I'm actually hoping that I can get RTS Title to work with me and do a session, especially for new agents, what happens at a settlement, okay? So you got to be careful when they're customers. That's why you need that buyer-broker agreement, because you can approach it differently if they are a client.
Sorry,
Now, realtors,
I have a
okay,
question. If I'm
okay.
working with a tenant, should I give them this form to sign because there is no any indication about tenants?
No, this is really for a purchase, okay? And I'm going to refer to paragraphs in our sales contract that match up with each of these, okay? So no, this is for a purchase, okay? Actually, what the law says for rentals, agency must be disclosed either in the lease or the lease application, whichever comes first. Unless they're a customer, then you have to use the disclosure form, okay? Realtors acting as standard agents are required by Virginia law and their code of ethics to treat all parties honestly and not knowingly give them false information. What does not knowingly give them false information? Okay. Well, not knowingly give them false information under our statute in Virginia. If a seller tells you something and they're your client, you have the right to believe them unless it's obvious they're lying, okay? So if I didn't know they lied to me and I repeat the information, we are actually protected under Virginia law, okay? And once again, that's another class that we'll do when we look at the agency statute in the future, okay? But you know you have to be honest. Our code of ethics removed the word fair because everyone now has the right to be represented, and they should have their own agent transaction. Promptly present all written offers and counter offers. I believe we discussed this in another session, but if you are representing the seller and there are multiple offers on a listing, okay, and they accept one offer, you need to write rejected. According to DPOR rules and regs, you need to write rejected on the other ones. Have your seller initial it and send it back. If you're a buyer's agent, once that listing agent tells you that they've accepted another offer, at that point, you need to withdraw your client's offer because it's still out there, okay? So don't let that happen. Just send them something in writing that, you know, that's withdrawn. They're going to think you're crazy, but protect your client. It only takes one person to be upset and sue you to ruin your career, okay? Disclose any adverse material facts actually known to them concerning the physical condition of the property. So adverse material fact actually known to them. If you know, you as an agent know of a material adverse fact, you have to disclose it. Not a seller. The seller, remember, only has 5 things they have to disclose as long as they don't intentionally defraud by hiding a fact, okay? So what's an adverse material fact? It's not a defect, and a lot of agents think it's a defect, but under our law, adverse means that it would cause someone not to buy the property, or they would probably write their contract different. Material fact is about the physical structure in the property inside the property line. Murder, suicide, ghost, those are not material facts about the structure. But if as a part of the murder, the floors got blood stained, were not cleaned up, now that's a material fact about the physical structure. So don't confuse it with a defect, okay? Adverse fact is if the buyer knew it and would not have bought that property and you knew it and you did not disclose it and it was about the physical condition of the property inside the property line, you have a problem. And offer properties without regard to race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status. Those are the federal. Elderliness. And you know today in Virginia, sexual orientation and national origin and gender identity. So sexual orientation, gender identity have been added to elderliness in the state of Virginia, as well as source of income and as well as veteran status. Okay, so watch how your seller says, we will not take a VA loan. That would be very dangerous today, you know, to reject a contract just because a veteran is using a VA loan. Be careful with that. All right, it's now protected under our state fair housing. Okay. So,
Hey, Larry,
yes.
a question about adverse fact. If a fire happened in a building, in a condo, and everything is being fixed already, do I need to disclose this?
Well, if it's fixed, then there's no defect. I mean, there's no fact, is it?
Okay.
If it was fixed according to what?
Like there was a fire in a condo, and there was like crack in the ceilings, and everything is fixed now.
And it was fixed by a licensed bonded contractor?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's nothing to disclose at that point.
Nothing to disclose. Okay.
All right. Okay. Because the material adverse fact about the physical structure has been removed.
But there is, if there is, because that's happened in a condo here in Old Church, there was a fire, and actually in the balcony, you can see the balcony is shut, it's closed, and there is still, the tenant cannot really use the balcony, and it's been obvious that there was a fire.
Then that's still no material adverse fact if they can't use the balcony.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, you'll see later when we talk about insurance.
Okay.
I recommend that all buyers, you know, ask for a clue report, and we'll see that when we get down to the insurance paragraph.
All right. Okay.
Now, legal requirements. You know that in Virginia, to be enforceable, all contracts must be in writing. That's statute of frauds when it comes to real estate, right? There is a recommended contract form that can be shown to you. Now, in VAR's form, the Virginia real estate contract is only a recommended form. It is not mandatory these forms be used. Some agents might be using VAR's contract, okay, or they might be using their own contract. So always look at the bottom of the forms and look for in VAR, look for the form number and the revision date, okay? At NVAR, the contract itself is usually changed January 1 and July 1, okay? So the latest form for the contract is 7/07/2020, okay? So if somebody's still using 07/2019, then there's going to be some stuff missing from their contract. So always make sure you know whose form you're dealing with, okay? And that's the reason I give a copy of the sales contract, a mock copy of the contract to a buyer up front with this notice and a buyer broker agreement so they can review it before we actually meet. Are they going to? Probably not, but at least they have it in their hands, okay? Just think about it. If you're a buyer and you sit down with me and you want to buy a house, and all of a sudden I take out this 13-page contract, at least it's only 13 now, right? Plus all the addendums, we're talking about probably 30 pages of material, and I'm asking you to sign it with, you know, up front. You're taking my word for everything. I'm not sure as a buyer that I'm willing to do that. Hopefully there's a homeowners association that they could get out of the documents after they have time to read it, okay? But most of everything that we're talking about here today is contained in paragraph 29 of the real estate contract, paragraph 29. And I'm not going to ask who's, you know, how many people in here have ever read paragraph 29, but I can guarantee you your purchasers haven't. And there's some really important stuff in paragraph 29. So I'm going to refer to it today and some other paragraphs, but when you get a chance, hopefully you have your contracts package in front of you. also, because we're going to take a look at some of this in our contract. Okay. Now,
Can I
yes,
ask?
sure.
Condo, am I required to be giving information to someone who hasn't put in an offer? Let's say, you know, they're asking about lawsuits, what's in the documents and stuff like that. Isn't it enough to give them the documents if they put in a an offer?
Yes, yes. And you'll see here in another paragraph that we can give it, we can discuss it, give advice, but we can't give legal. So when they have a question like that, I tell them they need to review the documents. And a lot of times they ask us to review the documents for them and tell them what's in it. I don't do that. I tell them, please read the documents, mark them up, and then ask me the questions you have.
But these, they're not even in a relationship with you.
Well, they've got to be before you got to the point where you had documents.
Some people,
Are you talking about they just call you and ask you about it before you even have them as a client?
Yes.
No, you can't discuss anything with them like that if they're not a client. Don't do that.
Okay.
Okay?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because we also have E&O we got to worry about.
Right.
When they come back and sue you for what they told you when they weren't even your client. Okay. All right. So it also says here under legal requirements, and I've got this marked as important to me. You had the opportunity to consult legal counsel concerning the contract, as well as any other questions you may have about the various laws concerning real estate referenced in this suggested contract form, especially paragraph 28, default paragraph. If I took this contract to an attorney and they read through it, and you were my buyer's agent, I'd probably ask that person, have they even discussed paragraph 28 default with you? Because most agents tell people if you default, you're going to lose your deposit. But that's not what paragraph 28 says. There's about $100,000 worth of damages in paragraph 28. So I like for the clients to get this reviewed, okay? Matter of fact, it's in my presentation to them that they should have the form reviewed before we even write. I know they're not going to do it, but I'm going to protect myself best I can. Now, when it comes to financing, mortgage rates and associated charges vary with financial institutions. Different people give you different rates, but also you want to concentrate on what APR is, annual percentage rate. How many points do they charge you to give you that lower amount of money? I remember I had a couple come into me, referred to me by my daughter, and they said, we've already met with the mortgage company. We already have our loan. All we need you to do is show us properties. And I said, you really probably should find another agent, because that's not what I do. I don't just show properties. And I asked them to leave. My daughter called and said, they called and said, you asked them to leave. I said, they said they didn't need me. Okay. And I relented, let them come back. And I said, do you know how much that lender was charging you for that loan, that interest rate that you negotiated? They were charging you $17,500. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, look at the points. Okay. At that point, they realized they probably needed me a little bit more than they thought they did, because they read online you don't need an agent, right? So, and it's going to be subject to the seller's approval and the lender's requirements as to the terms that they get. That's why we have the new law, Res-Patalo Integrated Disclosure Act, that actually lays out that they have to give you that loan estimate up front so you can compare it to other people. All right. Financing. Buyers may wish to obtain titles, insurance, coverage, and may consult an attorney concerning this choice, but they have no choice about the required lender's title insurance, correct? So you're going to have to take out the lenders. Should you take out the buyers? And folks, don't ever tell them they don't need the insurance, okay, to save money. That is, to me, one of the stupidest things real estate agents can do. Stay out of it. If you have your sales contract form, I want you to pull it out. If not, just listen to me when I read. I want you to go to paragraph 29G in the sales contract, okay? The one that we use on Wednesday, but also in this class. And it talks about title insurance, okay? Buyer may at their expense purchase owner's title insurance. Depending on the particular circumstances of the transaction, such insurance could have affirmative coverage, okay, against possible mechanics liens and material men's liens for labor and materials performed prior to settlement, and which, though not recorded at the time of recordation of buyer's deed, could be subsequently recorded. So in the state of Virginia, if anybody has done any work to the property your buyer is buying or supplied materials for the repairs and they have not been paid, they have 90 days from the last day of the month that that material was supplied or they did work to file a lien, okay? If you don't have this really good title insurance and that happens, your buyer's going to have a lien against their property for whatever that amount of money is. And the lien runs with the property. It doesn't run with the party that caused the lien. So there's a lot of stuff this covers that, you know, other than just a defect with the title. So don't recommend they not take it out, okay? And then it's this last paragraph of 29B. Buyer may purchase title insurance at either standard or enhanced coverage rates. Don't get cheap, okay? Get the enhanced rate for the purposes of owner's policy premium rate disclosure by buyer's lender. If any, buyer and seller require the enhanced rates be quoted by the buyer's lender. Buyer understands that nothing herein obligates buyer to obtain owner's title insurance coverage at any time, including its settlement. But the quote they're going to get is the enhanced policy, what I call the Eagle policy. I cannot imagine me ever purchasing a property without having the best title insurance out there, okay? And I'm sure Louisa and Johanna and anybody with Realty Title can you know, share some horror stories with you from past deals where people probably wish they had had it, okay? Also, insurance, next paragraph. The lender may require them to have a hazard title insurance policy from an insurance company of their choice. Of course, the lender has to approve it. And this is in paragraph 2D of our sales contract, correct? Paragraph 2D. How many days does a purchaser have to apply for their insurance on their property?
7 days.
It's 7 days from the date of ratification, right? Good.
Yes.
So they have to apply for it within 7 days. They don't have to take it out, but they have to apply for it. If they do not apply for it, okay? If they do not apply for that insurance, then if later they go to get insurance and they can't qualify for the mortgage and can't settle, they're going to be in default if they didn't apply for it in the first 7 days, because that's a breach of contract. Okay? Now, there are many factors that affect availability and cost of hazard insurance on the premises. Do you have any idea of what factors into what the insurance will cost? Well, it tells them here, right? Depending on the insurance company, factors may include past insurance claims filed on the premises, okay? On the premises, the current owner has made claims on the insurance, then that's going to affect the rate that your buyer gets, right? Claims filed by your buyer on properties that they've owned and their credit history. This is part of the Fair Credit Act. Insurance is covered by the Fair Credit Act. your actual credit score affects, like everything else, how much something is going to cost you. Someone with a 620 credit score is going to pay more for their insurance than someone with a 800. Okay, so these all factor in. So these past claims, there is something called a CLUE report, Comprehensive Loss Underwriters Exchange. Anytime you make an inquiry to the insurance company about something about your property, they're typing into the computer and it's going out into the cloud, into your CLUE report, and it stays there for 5 years. So when your buyer goes in to apply for the insurance within those first 7 days, which match up with the 7 days to make loan application, you know your insurance company is going to pull a CLUE report. You know they're going to do the flood. They're going to do everything that would affect the rate for that insurance. That way you get the right insurance quote up front so the lender can see if you still qualify for the mortgage and carry all this insurance. Okay? So in addition, flood insurance may be required on the property. How do you know if it's in a floodplain? Well, you can go to FEMA maps. How many agents actually go to FEMA maps and all this other stuff to help the buyer or send a buyer there to see if their house is in a floodplain? I don't know how many of you are using RPR, Realtor Property Resource. If you're not, I would suggest you do it. You go to NARRPR.com. You have to have your NERDS number, your national ID number. You have to have your Bright number and the email address that NAR uses for you. Set yourself up in RPR. For those that know about it, you can do a market analysis on any property anywhere in the United States. That's pretty cool, but there's a lot of other functions. So I can do a property report on a property. It takes about 30 seconds for it to pop up. I can superimpose the floodplain right there under heat maps, and it will show if the property's in a floodplain. Why would you write a contract for a purchaser on a property that's in a floodplain? Okay, that makes no sense to me unless they're willing to carry the additional cost for the insurance. Could we ask the seller to provide us a CLUE report? You could write it into your contract contingent upon the seller providing a CLUE report. How much would that cost the seller to obtain? Nothing. You're entitled to one free CLUE report on your property each year because of the Fair Credit Act, just like one free check of your credit. So if you want it, you can Google Get a CLUE, go to LexisNexis, put in your property address under free report, and they have to give it to you. Okay. Now this insurance paragraph here says at the earliest opportunity to arrange for hazard insurance. Our contract actually calls, they have to apply for it if it's lender required insurance within 7 days. I mean, if it's a cash deal, there's no lender, you don't have to worry about it, right? Any questions about that? Good. FIRPTA. If you're not familiar with FIRPTA.
For new construction, when do you start
construction,
insurance?
New construction, it depends on what their contract says. You're usually using their contract. If you use the board's contract, I think it still calls for it to be done within 7 days.
Really?
Generally, when you're doing a new construction, who's the lender?
They have their own vendor.
It's usually the lender they want, right?
Yeah, they want.
And who's the title company? Usually the title company they want. How do they get you to use those people?
By giving you some extra 10,000, 15,000.
They give you some incentive, right? We'll finish your basement if you use our people. So it's usually spelled out in their contract and their insurance, and they're probably even lining up the insurance company for you. So, okay. So new homes are a little different. This is matching up with our sales contract. Okay, FIRPTA. All right, is real property tax on a property for foreign investment, right? and it imposes a duty. And who does it impose the duty on to collect this money? It poses the duty on the buyer, okay? And it says right here, impose a duty on the buyer to withhold up to 15% of the gross sales price. And if the property is over $1 million, it is the buyer's responsibility under our statute to see that this 15% is collected by the title company and submitted to IRS unless the proper paperwork is filed by the seller, who is the foreign investor, to see how much their tax really is. It's not the seller and it's not the attorney's job. It's the buyer's job to make sure the attorney does this, okay? Now, most attorneys know what they're doing, and they have forms to be signed and all at the table, but that's kind of late, isn't it? So make sure the title company knows right up front if the person is bound by FIRPTA. It's 15% of the gross sales price, not the profit. What's 15% of $1 million?
10,000.
That's $150,000. And if there's not $150,000 equity in the property, somebody's got to bring some money to the table. And you think the foreign investor is going to bring money into the country to bring to the table? So we need to know this up front. So the seller is a foreign person for purposes of U.S. income taxation, and the property is in the U.S. So it says here a foreign person includes, but is not limited to, non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, foreign partnerships, foreign trusts, and foreign estates. Now, it says here the seller has to check the box, but you know, I've said many, many times in our classes, 2 questions you need to know from the other side. 6A, where do we send stuff to the seller? And 14, is the answer yes or no? Okay. There is no longer an addendum. It says an addendum attached. There is no longer an addendum for FIRPTA. It's all contained in paragraph 14 of the sales contract. Okay. So I'm not going to belabor this. Just note that it says here on the next page, the settlement agent may require the seller and the buyer to execute certain IRS forms, and they do, and most lenders are going to have it in their packet also, which may include the seller and buyer's tax ID numbers. If the seller doesn't have a tax ID number, they better get one, right? And submit the required withholding on behalf of the buyer. So the title company is submitting on behalf of the buyer, not the seller, right? The withholding. So if you list a property, one of the questions in the listing, are you a foreign investor or whatever? If they say yes, then get them started with their legal, tax, and financial advisors. We don't do that, right? I need to know that FIRPTA exists. Why do they have this law in Virginia, in the United States? If I sell a property, I'm a single guy, technically, right? If I own a property and I sell it, I have been there 2 of the previous 5 years, not 2 years in a row, but 2 of the previous 5 years, been my primary residence. How much of the profit is tax-free? Well, the first 250,000. If I'm married, how much is it?
500.
500,000. So in most instances in the United States, a U.S. citizen would probably not have any tax liability. Okay. Now I've had situations where people have been in a house for 40 years. They're still going to have a tax problem unless they do a 1031 tax-free exchange, and they can't do that on their own personal residence. So they're probably going to have a taxable event. But in most instances, we don't have a taxable event. You're not a U.S. citizen, you don't have that exemption. The U.S. government figures it's easier to find a buyer who is here in the United States than to go after income taxes in a foreign country for taxes owed in the U.S. So that's why it's the buyer's responsibility.
So Larry, now
Yes.
do you have to ask for citizenship confirmation?
I don't have to ask for confirmation. That's the reason I asked for the question. Yes or no. If they lied to us, then we're off the hook.
Okay.
Okay. And that's why the question, if you go to paragraph 14 of your sales contract, if you have your sales contract there, and on Wednesdays, remember that's contract day, so we'll eventually get to every paragraph in the contract. But paragraph 14 of the sales contract, seller is or is not a foreign person. You don't guess at that answer, okay? That's why I call the other side and ask. If they lie in the contract, okay, then the buyer is going to be off the hook. And that's why they actually have paragraph 14 in the contract to protect us.
So maybe I have to get it by emails and to have something in writing.
Well, not necessarily. Well, you could. It should, and I'm hoping they will add this as a required field in Bright, okay, where they would have to say yes or no, as a required field. Remember that information sheet that we talked about, that form changes? And they have one that the listing agent can fill out with the seller and download, where it has the answers to all these questions.
Yes.
And FERPTA is one of the questions. So hopefully more agents will start using that information sheet, have the seller fill it, download it for us, so we all have it at our fingertips. Okay. But if they lie, and if they check in the contract the wrong thing, or they tell you the wrong thing and they don't change it, it's pretty much going to get the buyer off the hook.
So is it a good practice then not to check it myself? Like even if I ask, maybe I shouldn't ask and just send it blank and they.
Well, the problem is if everybody misses it, then how are you going to prove anything? So that's the reason I call and ask. And if they go ahead and approve the contract with the wrong box checked, like you say, if you can get an email, but how many agents are going to send you an email on this? I don't know. But at least call and ask and keep records. Okay. Look, if we have a phone conversation, what's the best way to verify the information that we had? Send a text back. Send a text back to the party. Okay. So maybe send a text back saying, look, per our conversation, this is my understanding. If this is not so, if this was not what we agreed to, text me back. Okay. I think that's one way of protecting yourself.
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry,
Master,
did you
yes.
have any experience with foreign sellers? Did you? Because one of the attorneys said to us that if it would be foreign sellers and he didn't put the right information, lien will be attached to the house and the buyer supposed to be responsible.
Well, but you would have a defense for it. And look, I'm not an expert in FERPTA. That's why I tell them you need to make sure you have an attorney that knows what they're doing. There should have never been a settlement without the money collected. Okay. So if the money was not collected, the buyer should have never settled on the property, because now they're holding themselves out for the lien. Okay. And I could see that, but there should have never been a settlement, period, without the FERPTA form being filled out or the money withheld.
Larry, I have a question. On foreign person, if the seller is a permanent resident, but the nationality is some foreign country, is that considered a foreign person?
I don't know. That's one you need to run by the title company.
Okay.
I would say yes, but I can't guarantee it. So I always defer to the title company with this. Karen and I had one 2 years ago where the people were from Australia, and we did everything right. We got it started from the start. Okay. They withheld $80,000 from the seller. Their tax liability, I think, was about $4,000. Okay. And this it has to be ascertained within 60 days or the money sent to IRS. So they need to have their tax ID number. They need to talk to tax advisors. We got them to their tax advisors, whatever. And it still took almost to 60 days after settlement to get the final from IRS, how much the final money was. Now, look, if the money's withheld, say 150,000 was there and it was withheld. After 60 days, it's going to IRS. And the seller is now going to have to go to IRS to get their money back after the liabilities figured out. All we want to do is make sure the buyer knows that they could be, responsible for this. So don't take the chance. Make sure they talk to their tax and legal advisors, et cetera, as to their liability. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Master plan. Do you know what the master plan is? Okay. Master plan is what the county would like to see the county look like in the future. It's not currently zoned for that, but this is what we would like for it to look like. I've made a lot of money in my younger days when I was full of energy by being able to read tax maps, identifying where they wanted an area to change, go out, put groups of homeowners together for the purpose of selling to a builder contingent upon the zoning changing, et cetera. So the master plan, they have the right to review the master plan. They should review the master plan. If they're going to buy a property, it's not right in the middle of a subdivision, but there's some vacant ground around the house or near it, they should be seeing what the county says it can be used for now and what it would be in the future. I was just reading online out in Madison County. This lady purchased like 8 pieces of property, put it all together. Now she wants to build this resort area right on the river out there, and they're holding hearings. And all the people are yelling and screaming, but by right of zoning, she has the right to do it. Okay, and the board is they want it because it's going to be an upscale place for people to come and tourism, etc. But anybody that was going to buy a property adjacent to those 8 pieces of property, they should actually see what's planned for there. Okay, and you can do that online now or go to the planning offices and ask. Okay, now does the seller have to disclose that a road's going to be built next to their property, or my favorite was the new home project said that's going to be a park behind your house, and it ended up being a parking lot with bright lights, and the people wanted to sue the agent and the builder, but it was the parking lot for the park. So they didn't lie. They just didn't say it was ing lot. So they have the right to check that stuff out, correct? Now, property condition and environmental matters, okay? Various inspections, they have the right to have inspections, okay? And home warranty insurance programs are available. The contract says in paragraph 10, okay, they have the right to have what? Inspections done, not one, as many as they want. And I know there's a case right now where the people did like 9 or 10 of these, and now they want a $95,000 or some amount of dollar credit back from the seller to take care of all the problems. You have the right to have all these done. That doesn't mean a seller's going to what? Agree to fix everything. So once again, we have a form called adverse effects of consequences for a buyer if they don't do certain things. I recommend they have all these reports because I'm not going to sit here and read all these items that they should check out. But they're all listed in paragraph 29 of the sales contract. So if the people actually read the contract, and if you look at paragraph 29, this is how it starts out. Buyer and seller should carefully read this contract. Be sure that the terms accurately express their respective understanding as to their intentions and agreements. Broker can counsel on real estate matters, but if legal advice is desired by either party, such party is advised to seek legal counsel. Buyer and seller are further advised to seek appropriate professional advice concerning the condition of the property, tax, and insurance matters. And it goes on to say, in paragraph 29D, broker, buyer and seller acknowledge that broker is being retained solely as a real estate agent, not as an attorney, tax advisor, lender, appraiser, surveyor, structural engineer, mold or air, quality expert, home inspector, or other professional service provider. And they expect us to be all those. Make sure they understand we're none of those. I specialize in what? Marketing real estate, bringing buyers to sellers together and helping them get to settlement, not being the person that can answer every one of those questions. And probably 70 or 80% of the questions I receive is in reference to all these and what should we do, okay? And every time I give an answer, you know, it's always followed with, but they need to talk to their what? They need to talk to their attorney, right? So there's plenty of places for them to get the information about all those. Home energy efficiency, okay? Green is becoming very big out there, all right? I teach a green class. I'm actually working on a master's degree in sustainability from San Francisco Institute of Architecture because I think that is the future of real estate, okay? So if you remember the discussion we had last week about them adding different things to the disclosure on DPOR site, one of them is now home energy information. They have the right to go to Residential Energy Services Network. ResNet is the one that I use to perform an energy audit. If not, they should have an energy audit done afterwards, just so shows what they need to take care of to increase their energy efficiency and save money, okay? And make sure they understand. We can ask the owner, and we do all the time, we ask the owner for copies of their utility bills. What does that mean? That really means nothing to me. I mean, give you an example. My house in Mineral. I live there by myself most of the time. Betty, when she come back from Florida, maybe. But the air conditioning, I don't use it that much. But the heat, you know, I put the central heat down really low because I have individual units in the rooms. In the water bill, you know, just me, I'm usually paying the minimum, which is $60. Now, a family, my son and his wife and new baby moved in the energy bill that I had before that was like maybe $90 to $100 a month. Last month was $400 running the AC. They put in a pool. They've got all kinds of other stuff. So you can't really rely too much on what the energy bills of the previous, you know, current owner is versus what it will be when you move in. All right. Now, responsibility. Okay. Each party to a real estate transaction should carefully read all documents, and I've got this one marked as really important to me, to be sure that the terms accurately express the understanding of the parties as to their intentions and the agreements they have reached. We can counsel on real estate matters, but we can't give legal or tax advice, etc. Okay? If you have any questions about the responsibilities and roles of realtors or about any other material presented here, please ask us for more information. You should be prepared to answer questions about this, but not give legal advice, etc. It also talks about sexual offenders here. They have the right to go to the site and check it out. Such information may be obtained by contacting your local police department, and they should satisfy themselves. I think if you ever ran went to the state police and checked out your own subdivision, own area, you might be surprised how many people are classified as sexual offenders. Doesn't mean they did anything terribly wrong. They could have been 17 and in a relationship with their girlfriend, and when they turned 18, the same relationship, parents found out the 18-year-old is an adult. There's a lot of that type of stuff. So they need to check it out themselves, not us. All right, unless you're the buyer or seller. I used to get a kick out of the highest incidence of sexual offenders lived in Culpeper. And then I found out why. They all had the same mailing address. That's where the prison was. So this information, you know, they've got to figure it out themselves. Right? And then page 3 of this, types of real estate representation. We're not going to go through agency today, but what I want you to understand, if we enter into a contractual obligation, that written buyer, broker, or seller obligation, we have what we call ordinary care. We do not have fiduciary duties in the state of Virginia. We have statutory duties. Fiduciary was one of absoluteness. Statutory is ordinary. What is expected of an agent in the area where you are working? Okay. And sometimes people get that confused. They try to hold us to a higher standard than what the law requires because they don't realize we went from common law to statutory law. All right. So you have to perform to the contract agreement, conduct marketing activities, but C is the one that's very important. Assisting the client in drafting and negotiating offers and counteroffers, amendments, addenda, and establishing strategies to accomplish the client's goals. You have a duty to establish a strategy. Sit down with the people. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Let's come up with a strategy before we even start out, okay? But I want to point out F here too. Disclosing to the client all material facts related to the property. You have that duty whether a customer or a client. But to a client, you also have the duty concerning the transaction of which they have actual knowledge. Anything that affects the transaction. I had somebody in my class Saturday for the board and said the people representing the buyer knew they didn't qualify for the mortgage, but they didn't tell us. That should be a violation of law. No, they had no client relationship to the seller. They were representing the buyer, and financial information is confidential. So, but if you were representing the seller and you knew the customer had problems, so the customer being the buyer on one of your own listings, that you don't become their agent, okay? And you knew that the buyer had financial troubles, then you'd have to tell the client of that financial problems because they're, you know, you don't have that duty of confidentiality. Okay. Now, we also have the duty of confidentiality, right? Brokers shall maintain confidentiality of all personal and financial information, but they have to understand it's information that I receive during the brokerage relationship, So if you go out on a listing appointment, I start out with, don't share anything with me that you don't want me to tell everybody else, because if I don't become your agent, then I'm duty bound to tell everybody everything I know about your property, even your financials, okay? So once I become your agent, any of that stuff you provide to me, I have to take to my deathbed with me, okay? Not when the listing expires, when I do. So I make sure they understand up front, don't share any of that with me until we have a brokerage relationship, okay? And it talks about here also exercising ordinary care. And then, you know, make sure they understand we could be showing more than one client the property, et cetera. That stuff is found in your listing agreement, in your buyer agency agreement, okay? And then it talks about the different types of agency relationships. I'm not going to sit here and discuss agency relationships with you today, but it's very good information for them to read. So any questions about any of that or any other questions today for Ask Larry?
Yes.
I want you to be familiar with this form. it's a good form to use for you to have signed by your client to keep in your folder. Okay, somebody had a question.
Yeah, I have to ask you one question, please. It's say that, you know, if I sell the house and somebody asks me, how much did you sell for? I can tell the customer, I mean, any other customer that yes, it was sold for this price. Is this a confidential or no?
If somebody asks you what a property sold for after it's settled,
Yeah.
you can tell them the price because that's not confidential information. That's
Okay.
That's truthful. Now, look, if you're showing me a house and you don't have a buyer broker agreement, and I ask you, they're asking 300,000. Do you think they'll take less? What did I just tell you you were?
You're not in the, you know, I mean,
I just told you you were my agent in my mind, and in the state of Virginia, that's all it takes. If you're out with somebody and you don't have a written buyer broker agreement, and they ask you a question like that, then they're telling you they're relying on you to help them make a decision. You better have a written buyer broker agreement. Our state law says you better have an agreement. Okay, it says you better be able to read body language, and you better be able to read their mind.
on that property or any other property?
Any
also?
property.
Any property. I mean,
Yeah.
I have to have a sign with my buyer, this property.
If they ask you a question where you have to use your brain to answer, to make a decision to answer, you better have a buyer broker agreement with them. Could we sit in a conference room and talk about the real estate market all day long? Certainly. But when they ask you a question about a specific property, then at that point, you better have a buyer broker agreement or unrepresented party form signed, period. And we'll cover that. We'll cover that in a session in the future.
Larry, one question. So I sent a contract to the other house. The agent made me change the contract by saying we had used a home inspection for information purpose only. So she asked me to remove that. On page 5, we have that this contract is contingent upon home inspection and other inspection, addendum attached. So I had checked that one out. She asked me to sign the other one where buyer has the opportunity to make this contract contingent upon home inspection. So when we select a home inspection for information purpose only, on the main contract, should we select
what should have happened? That should have stayed the same. And then on the home inspection addendum form, okay, itself.
Means what? Like which one? Which option?
Listen to me. I'm telling you the answer. Okay, you should have left it alone in paragraph 10 that there would be a home inspection, and then on the home inspection and radon testing contingency addendum, you would have used option 2, which is a home inspection with option to void. And it's for informational purposes only, but you still have the right to void. When you write in a contract, okay, anything in writing overrides any pre-printed material. So when you say for informational purposes only, what if this shows a cracked foundation? Would your purchaser still want to buy the house?
No.
Well, then they're stuck with it. They have to, because you said it was for informational purposes only. Okay, so you got to be careful when you do that. That's why they develop home inspection addendum option 2. It still gives your buyer the right to back out. But if you said for informational purposes only, you got the information. What are you going to do now?
He cannot get out. He or she. Okay.
No, because it said it was for what purpose?
That's how I did it. I selected the first option, that the contract is contingent upon home inspection and other inspection.
But you said she made you take it out.
Yes, she made me take out. She said it makes the same thing. It says the same thing when you have a home inspection for information purpose.
It doesn't say the same thing.
She says, oh, they will take care of the...
Well, she's wrong. You know, who are you going to believe, her or me?
No, no, no. You only definitely. But she said this.
You asked me, I told you, right?
Yeah, we got it ratified with
I
that.
want you, well, if you ratified, it's too late now. Hopefully everything's okay in the report. It's just minor stuff. Okay.
We haven't done it. It's tomorrow, the home inspection.
Okay. Well, hopefully everything is fine. Okay. But
Larry, is there
yeah.
something like implicit buyer's agreement?
Is there anything what?
About something like implicit buyer's agreement. So before being the actual writing buyer's agreement.
No. Okay. It's got to be in writing to be enforceable in Virginia. Okay. I want you to, if you have your sales contract, let me make a final point on the informational purposes only. Okay. If you have your sales contract, go to paragraph 32, page 11 of 13 of the sales contract. Okay. So it says here, miscellaneous. Do you find it? The last sentence of miscellaneous, typewritten or handwritten provisions included in this contract will control all pre-printed provisions that are in conflict. When you put something in informational purposes only, that controls the whole contract. Okay? So rather than using the addendum that said they still had the right to void, you overrode it by writing something or typing something in a contract. Okay? And it's like simple algebra. You change one side of the equation, you have to change the other side also to make sure that it equals out. That's why you need attorneys involved when you do that. That's why they developed paragraph 2 of the home inspection addendum. Okay? I'm not sure that agent hasn't been around a long time and doesn't know there's an option 2 on the home inspection addendum, but you filled it out correctly when you did it. Okay.
That's how I've been doing it. And she said home inspection for information purpose.
Well, I understand, but at that point, you might want to talk to your manager and have your manager talk to them and say, look, paragraph 2, we still have the option to void if there's anything major. Okay. She didn't want you to be able to void the contract.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, you go over it with your buyer. Do you understand with this other paragraph that said handwritten things override all the other provisions? Are you willing to take that chance? Now, it's a little different in Maryland. If you have a Maryland license, a little different in Maryland. Maryland law allows the buyer, no matter what, to bail out, even if it's for informational purposes only. You can void, but this is Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Great. I just like everybody to know that form is there and to pay special attention to paragraph 29. I know it's boilerplate, but there's a lot of good information in paragraph 29 that the buyer should really pay attention to.
The other question I had was well and septic. Is there something specific you have to see, or well and septic? The seller never pays for inspection, right? Because I don't think so.
The seller, you could try to negotiate for the seller to pay, but they're not going to. And look, your buyer's better off paying for it, so they choose the company and they get the report that they're happy with. Because if a seller pays for it, the seller's probably going to choose the company. Okay, and then later on you didn't like the report. It's just like termite inspection. For the fee that it would cost, the buyer is better off paying for the termite because you choose the company. Okay, why would you let the seller choose the company? Okay, so the only time under termite that the buyer can't pay it is a VA contract using VA addendum, which just makes no sense to me. But they think they're protecting the public when they're not thinking.
And is there a pool inspection or ever, or no?
There is. You could have a pool inspection under home inspection because it says others, but you should write it up. Don't try to spring it on the owner. Just write in other that there will be a pool inspection. by a licensed, approved contractor.
Okay.
Larry, what is your recommendation on inspection, termite inspection, paid by the buyer or controlling by the seller?
I think the buyer should always pay for it. That way they choose the party and they're happy with the report. I mean, if you get a report from an owner that shows no damage and then you move in and then there's damage, the owner's going to say, hey, that happened after you moved in because here's my report. So the only time the buyer can't pay for it if it's a VA contract.
Thank you.
They're forbidden from doing it. Actually, I prefer if I was representing the seller, the termite paragraph leaves it pretty wide open that even previous damage would have to be fixed. The one thing I like about VAR, Virginia Association of Realtors contract, is they put a limit. If the repairs to the property for termite are going to exceed X amount of dollars, right, then it's negotiable between the buyer and the seller, and the seller has the right to void the contract if it's going to be over that amount of money, because it really leaves it wide open. I've asked NVAR to take a look at that paragraph and see if we couldn't do something similar, limiting the seller's liability. Anything else?
One more question before you go, Larry. When you take off the contingencies, the home inspection contingency, if you choose for void only and you want to use the same form, would you write anything in the middle? They ask you to write if you have anything. Of course, you're not going to write anything. Would you write any sentence in there?
No.
Just leave it blank?
Just leave it that way. That way you get to have the inspection. Everybody's protected. It gives you the right. So back to where you write for informational purposes only, home inspection. Well, then you've taken out all the clauses where the owner has to have utilities in service. Hopefully they will, but think about it. Or what happens if somebody goes in there and is hurt in the property? So as a seller, I probably prefer to have that addendum also, because it spells out, all the protections for people. What happens if the home inspector does damage to the property for some reason when they're in there? Who's going to be liable for it in informational purposes only? I mean, you've taken all that out of play. So, I know agents thinking, well, I'm protecting my seller, but it really isn't. Okay. I mean, think about it. Hopefully this property that we're talking about is in a homeowners association, so that if the report comes back and shows damage anyway, if it comes back and shows damage anyway, then you still have your homeowner's docs to get out on. But
But most of the bidding war, you don't have a choice.
Well, you have a choice. You use the form that says adverse consequences to your actions, buyer, if you do this, so they don't want to come back and sue you in the future. I understand what you're saying. I'm not arguing with that point. Okay, but who always ends up? What's the first word out of everybody's mouth when they're unhappy? I'm going to what? I'm going to sue you. Remember the license plate from my attorney in Fairfax City at one time when he was still practicing said, I-S-U, the number 4-U. I sue for you. That's the first thing out of everybody's mouth. I'll never forget Richard Bird's license plate number. Okay. So, any other questions?
One quick question. What do you say to an agent who show up at your listing without making the appointment?
If you do that again, I will report you to the Board of Realtors for a violation of the Code of Ethics.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, because it's a direct violation of the Code of Ethics.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a fee also, a fee chart we were going through.
Do what?
If you go without notifying them, there's a fee chart also for violation.
Well, it could be, it can be a major violation depending. We had, somebody walk into a house where a young teenage girl was getting out of the shower, and there's these strange people, standing in her house when it was by appointment, you had to make the appointment, whatever. Even if a house is vacant If it says call agent first, you must do it. Otherwise, direct violation of the code of ethics. And just because there's a lockbox on a house doesn't mean it's on the market, right? Could be an old lockbox. So if you go into a house that's not on the market, that's called breaking and entering, even though there was a lockbox on the door. So, any other questions?
Yeah, and in the same issue, Larry, like I go last week with the COVID and everything, I had appointment and I go there and another agent is coming in my time and opening the door right in front of me. And I had that appointment. What should I do in that situation?
I would wait until after they left.
But my time would be.
You know, the reason being, look, there should never be two agents in a property with only one having opened a lockbox. Okay, if you were the first one there and somebody wanted to come in after you, you tell them you have to wait until we finish. Okay, I'll put the key back in the lockbox, and then you will have to access. And they get all upset. But if you don't, who was the last person who showed the property if anything's missing? That you. And you're gonna say, well, somebody followed me in. Well, then you broke the rules too by letting somebody in, and you don't even know they're really an agent. Could be somebody wanting to do damage to you and your party with you. Got to be careful out there.
Okay, so they shouldn't adhere to the timing. Like if I have from 12 to 12:30,
well,
my time?
So I would have contacted at that point. I would have contacted the showing contact people and say, is there a confusion on the time, because this is the time you gave me and this other person's entering, so maybe wait a few minutes and have them assign you a new time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Larry, when the inspection is done by the inspector, buyers can bring the inspector again on the walkthrough or no?
Well, technically they could. It says that they can bring them, a representative with them. So technically they could.
They could. So they cannot refuse it. Seller cannot refuse it.
And we'll look at paragraph 11 as we go through our contract series. But it says the buyer or their representative. So representative could be somebody other than their agent, right?
Right. So they can bring it. Okay.
Well, technically, I think so. Yeah. Okay.
But seller can refuse it.
Well, how can they refuse it? Paragraph 11 says the buyer or their representative, if they're saying this is their representative, how are you going to refuse it?
Okay.
I don't know. And the buyer probably not going to be there anyway for the final walkthrough. So, but the danger of that is inspector goes in and finds something else that wasn't included and it's not going to be fixed. So
yeah, but the seller will not be happy. He said, "Why you bring it here?"
Well, yeah. So because you didn't take it out of your contract, you don't like it, take out or representatives. Did you read your contract? That's what this useful information about real estate said. Read your contract. Make sure this is what you guys all agreed to. Okay.
This has happened with somebody. He was telling me.
Well, sure. Everything's happened to somebody.
Yeah.
I've got stories that would scare you to death.
I'm not sure. I have to. Maybe you can, but you cannot. I'm not sure.
In 43 years, I've seen a lot of stuff happen.
Yes, sure. I'm pretty sure.
And I'm going to tell you, every day I'm amazed about new things that happen I hadn't seen before in real estate. So
yeah.
Okay. No other questions, then. Thank you for attending. I appreciate everybody attending. And Wednesday at 11 o'clock, we'll continue through the contract with me. If you're with Office Basics, we're going to continue with paragraph 8. So first 3 weeks, we've gotten through only 7 paragraphs. So it's pretty detailed. Okay?
Thank you very much, Larry.
Thank you.
Thank everybody for attending.
Thank you.
See a lot of you Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.